Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I thought it would be fun to do a multi-part video where I explain my top 10 on my anime list. This video starts off with my top 9 anime with a dedicated video for my number 1 favorite anime, which you can watch after this if you want. And the next video in this series will be my top 9 manga with another dedicated video for my number 1 slot. But a couple disclaimers. One is that I'll be talking in depth about these shows, so there may be spoilers if you haven't seen them. None are that recent, so many of you may have already seen these, but fair warning just in case. And second is that these are my top 10 as of today. So you may not agree and think, oh my god, Cadence, these shows are so overrated. You're such a normie. It's fine if you disagree. We can still be nice to each other and acknowledge that we enjoy different things. But you're more than welcome to leave your own top favorites in the comments and we can chat about it because I'd love to know. So anyways, let's get started. This will be in order, so I'll start with number 10, and it's Porco Rosso, a Studio Ghibli film from 1992. This was one that I watched a handful of years ago for the first time. I saw it in theaters one day and was thoroughly entertained. But I don't think this is one that people tend to think of when it comes to Ghibli, so I always like suggesting it for something new. But it centers around Porco Rosso, an Italian pilot and currently a freelance bounty hunter that chases after air pirates, the antagonist being Curtis, an American pilot who gets contracted by air pirate gangs to carry out various attacks. On top of that, there is nothing like a love interest to fuel the fire between Porco and Curtis, although it's more one-sided as Curtis falls in love with Gina, a longtime friend of Porco and a group of friends they had during World War I. On his way to Milan, Curtis pursues Porco and shoots down his plane thinking he killed him, when in actuality Porco survived and ends up taking his plane to his mechanic, where he meets Fio, the mechanic's granddaughter. Turns out that Fio is the one who will actually be doing the engineering this time, which Porco is skeptical and tries to back out because she's young and a girl. But Fio convinces him to work with her, saying that who she is shouldn't be the main focus, but that to be in their line of work, they require inspiration. I love that because I'm someone who works in a predominantly male industry, and pushing through the doubt is just something I have to do. And so this is one major aspect that I really value about Ghibli films, and it's the portrayal of girls and women. Hayao Miyazaki said in an interview back in 2013, quote, "Many of my movies have strong female leads. Brave, self-sufficient girls that don't think twice about fighting for what they believe with all their heart. They'll need a friend or a supporter, but never a savior. Any woman is just as capable of being a hero as any man." And don't get me wrong, I enjoy a lot of series where the female lead gets saved or shown as a bit helpless, but it's really refreshing when they don't. But besides all that, it's about learning of Porco's past, this silly rivalry with Curtis, and then where the various characters go after their disputes are settled. But like I said, this movie has some really funny moments and a great story that continues to stand out to me, enough for me to keep it on my list. Next up in my number 9 slot is Cowboy Bebop. This is a classic for me. I've rewatched it almost every year, and it's one of the very few animes that I love dubbed in English. It's so good. The opening song, Tank, is perfection and one that I never skip. I'd be surprised if anyone doesn't know this series or hasn't heard that song because I feel like everything about Cowboy Bebop is so recognizable at this point. I first watched it in the early 2000s during the Adult Swim days. But we have a ragtag group of bounty hunters going across the galaxy trying to capture criminals to make some precious oolong, all while being hunted down themselves by their own past. Whether that's Spike and the Syndicate, Jet and his past love, or Faye dealing with her long and distant past in general. The main cast complement each other so well, and each make up for what the others lack. Besides the clear jazz influence, an incredibly stylistic way this anime is presented and delivered, which I can simplistically describe as just very cool. I really enjoy the entertaining banter and fairly straightforward episodic plots. Each episode where they encounter their next bounty reveals a little bit more about the characters, their morals, and personal motivations. Despite their successes, they're funnily always broke and eating unsatisfying meals. But regardless of what everyone is going through, they keep moving forward. With the exception of Spike, to some degree, who's so intrinsically tied with the people from his past, which I always loved the direct correlation of his remaining natural eye, quote, only seeing the present, while the other cybernetic eye, quote, only sees the past. Another highlight for me is the aspect of how the Bebop crew sees each other as found family. So does the big part of the reason why this is in my top 10 have to do with nostalgia? Maybe. But I honestly think the animation, style, overall story, and characterizations are things that have made a lasting impression on me that no matter how many times I rewatch, I enjoy. Next, in my number 8 slot is Gundam Seed, another anime that takes me back to the early 2000s when shows were like 50 episodes minimum. But this is another where every single opening and closing song were pure gold. Nami Tamaki, amazing. TM Revolution, sign me up. I recently rewatched the entire series in September, but before that, it had been a very long time since I had watched it. And I don't know, I must have been going through it because I can't believe I cried during certain parts of the series. Between the torn friendship, all the loss and grief, the fierce struggle for peace and resolution, it all just got to me like I hadn't experienced in any of my previous watch-throughs. Keep in mind that I'm only familiar with a few eras in the Gundam universe, but we have a raging conflict between coordinators who are altered humans with enhanced traits and naturals who are unaltered, in an effort to eliminate each other as a show of who is actually superior, or in a way the quote right type of human. The military organizations Earth Alliance and SAFT develop various destructive weapons and exploit them against each other. Throw into the mix a group of university students who get caught in a conflict and subsequently pulled into the military, which exposes them to the horrors of war and betrayal, specifically between the main characters Kira and Asran, two childhood friends who are both coordinators that go their separate ways to shockingly find themselves on opposing sides. The development of all the characters is honestly really amazing, and it's no surprise because, I mean, war has a way of forcing people to grow up against their will. Then there's various characters who end up finding their own way in order to stop the unnecessary bloodshed. If you've watched this series, once I got past Flay's seriously but intentionally flawed character and all the recycled Gundam launches and battle scenes, I genuinely love this show because of the characters and how emotional they are. Whether that's showing grief or love or even indifference. There were also many satisfying moments where people reevaluate what they've come to believe and challenge each other to think beyond their narrow and selfish causes. Plus, this series has one of my favorite couples, my OTP, Asran and Kagali. I remember having a crush on Asran, and then I got so invested in his pairing with Kagali. It was really nice to have romance explored in a Gundam series, and it's a big reason why I love this anime as much as I do. And another thing, it has such a cool and epic Gundam Rising moment in the beginning with Strike Gundam. Gives me goosebumps every time. Next, in my number 7 slot is Full Metal Panic Fumoffu, the purely comedic side of the main Full Metal Panic series, which you don't necessarily have to watch beforehand, but it helps in understanding the humor. It's basically a bunch of spin-offs of the main characters trying to have a normal high school experience, but with a twist. So, quick run through of the characters. We have Kaname Chidori, who is a whispered and has technological information embedded within her that's highly sought after by terrorist organizations. Initially unaware of this, she finds herself under the protection of Sosuke Sagara, a sergeant in a counter-terrorist group. But in order to efficiently protect Kaname, Sosuke has to socially blend into the high school scene, which proves to be very difficult and basically impossible with him having grown up in military groups his whole life. So every little thing that could potentially pose a problem for Kaname, Sosuke takes to the extreme to protect her, which a lot of the times ends up in him blowing up parts of their high school. Of course, besides Kaname, no one else knows that Sosuke is actually a sergeant, so they just think he's this huge military mecha enthusiast. This series is so funny and my type of humor. I can rewatch this over and over, which I've done over the years, and always find myself laughing at how exasperated Kaname is with Sosuke, how clueless he is on reading the room, the utter lengths he goes to try and protect her when it's totally unnecessary. But then Kaname, despite all that, has a soft spot for him. I wouldn't love this as much as I do if the dynamic between the two wasn't cute or funny. There isn't a continuous story, and it's essentially a series of exaggerated events during a school day like an art class or club activities, things like that. Probably my most favorite episode is episode 3, when they go to the beach and Sosuke thinks Kaname was kidnapped. Everything about this anime with the comedic timing is so chaotic, and I love it. Overall, it's great humor with the big added bonus that it was done by Kyoto Animation. Number 6 goes to Kaichou Maid-sama, another comedic series but more romance-centric. I recall so many times where I would have this series playing in the background while I worked or did other things, thus leading to the beginning opening song forever being ingrained in my head. But we have Misaki Aizawa, the definition of tsundere, who, due to her family being really hard up on money, takes it upon herself to work in order to financially help out. And where does she work? None other than a maid cafe. So, wanting to keep it a secret, since the image of herself as a maid is totally opposite of the image she tries so hard to maintain at school as the demon president, imagine her embarrassment when one day she's working and Usui, the popular boy in school, nonchalantly passes by and sees her in full maid uniform. From then on, Usui begins to frequent the maid cafe, all while Misaki is adamant that he keeps this side of her life a secret from the rest of the class. She wants to be taken seriously and not have others undermine her authority as the school president. While there's the classic trope of Usui often coming to the rescue, the way he approaches it is really silly, since he just endlessly teases Misaki about anything and everything. As the series goes on, Misaki is in a constant state of blushing, all while pushing Usui away, until their feelings eventually boil over and there's no use denying it. But of course, Misaki wouldn't be the tsundere that she is without still calling Usui an idiot after every confession. There isn't some huge overarching plot in the storytelling, except seeing what little happenings and singular events lead Misaki and Usui to get closer and closer. But it's really entertaining and fun to see their relationship develop, more often than not, because they'll find themselves in situations like encountering a rival school, or a love rival in the form of Misaki's childhood friend, to the classic sports festival, to a trip with the maid cafe crew, which of course Usui tags along. So it's a bunch of loosely connected stories that I can, without a doubt, thoroughly enjoy as it takes us all along the crazy antics surrounding the main cast of characters. Next up for number 5 is Princess Mononoke, another Studio Ghibli film from 1997 that was actually my introduction to Ghibli when I was a kid. I don't know how many times I've watched this film to this day, but I feel like I get something different from it every time. It follows Ashitaka, who, in the process of protecting his village from a horde of beasts, becomes cursed by the demon boar. While this curse does grant him more power, it's at the cost of his life and well-being. And the longer it lingers, the more it takes over him. So in order to find a cure, he resigns to leaving his village and travels to Irontown, where he meets all sorts of characters, from the hardworking women to the leader herself, Lady Eboshi. After learning Irontown's objective and the role they play in the struggle between nature and human destruction, he encounters Sun, who fights to protect the forests and creatures within them. Caught in the middle, Ashitaka tries to find the balance in stopping continuous deforestation and the loss of human lives in the war waged against beasts. There is definitely a running theme surrounding the cycle of hatred where the humans are trying to thrive, but at the price of nature herself and then nature striking back. After all, human settlement does not come without its own consequences. But the lack in empathy from all sides is the hard part, and something that I think was explored really well in this movie. How do you find harmony and pay respect to the thing that came before you? There are so many counter arguments for either side. We have Sun, who only knows the forest and her found family, with Moro and her wolf siblings, finding their lands decimated and fellow beasts dying at the hands of humans. They take arms and seek to destroy the humans and restore the natural order of things that do not include anything but themselves. However, those women in Irontown are only doing what they can to survive with the technology humans have developed, albeit one of those things being guns meant to take down the beasts faster. But they feel their own hurt and loss of loved ones because of Sun and the forest dwellers. So who's in the right when both need to coexist? I think Princess Mononoke is such a beautiful and powerful movie because of the Ghibli movies that I've watched, this has the strongest message for me. Because while humans have the capabilities to industrialize the earth, that doesn't mean we should. Advancement inherently isn't a bad thing, but if handled poorly by sacrificing the very nature that allows you to prosper via food, resources, and the land itself, things become imbalanced. And this continues to be true to this day in our own world. So because of all these things, this deservingly gets a spot in one of my top animes. Continuing on with slot number 4 is another Ghibli film, Howl's Moving Castle. Since its release in 2004, I haven't really fallen in love with any other Ghibli film released after that. But this story and the world building really captivated me. It starts with Sophie Hatter, whose encounter with the Witch of the Waste results in being cursed, which turns her into an old woman. Resolved that she can't stay where she is, as she tries to return back to her youthful self, she ends up taking shelter in a moving castle owned by the heartthrob wizard Howl. While on this journey with the group in the castle, Sophie adopts a more confident attitude, as I feel she hides behind her old age appearance since she doesn't need to live up to any expectations and feels free of judgment, which is oddly similar but in a different way with how Howl highly values his good looks as it determines his mood. The scene where his hair dyes gets mixed up is so funny because Howl is just overtly dramatic. But as Sophie and Howl start to go beyond themselves, their concerns and worries become grander with the ongoing war. I will admit that there are quite a few plot points that float about without fully getting explained, and some were left to assume, which I don't necessarily have a problem doing, but I think between the art, character, and relationship development, this movie really blew me away. I also failed to mention that the music for Howl's Moving Castle and many Ghibli films in general are one of my absolute favorites of all time. I remember watching the Studio Ghibli 25 Years Orchestra concert and I cried during so many moments of it. There's a reason why I have 3 Ghibli films in my top list, and music plays a big part of that. But I do want to go back to the character and relationship development that I really appreciated. With Sophie starting off very reserved and content to live within her means as a hatmaker, she learns to rely on herself and her own strengths to resolve conflicts surrounding those in the castle and Howl himself. As she reverts back to her youth, I feel those were indications of her progress and improvement with her self-confidence. While I honestly think Howl is just along for the ride, I feel like he acted as a catalyst for Sophie. He could see through the curse and presented opportunities for Sophie to take advantage of in order for her to come to her own. And then there's their relationship, which I think was so heartwarming. Like when Howl opts to relocate the castle and provide Sophie with things that mean a lot to her. So cute. And don't get me started on that well-known image and scene of when Howl comes crashing downwards to prevent a bomb from impacting where Sophie and the others were located. While this movie isn't perfect, it has so many elements that I enjoy and I'll continue to rewatch. We're in my top 3, and the third slot goes to Haikyuu. And it's fitting because I'm specifically talking about season 3 of the anime series. I don't know any other series that has gotten me as hyped and excited as this particular season of Haikyuu, where Karasuno faces Shida Torizawa, a match during the spring tournament that decides which team will proceed to the nationals. I recall watching it for the first time being so amazed and on the edge of my seat every single episode. I found myself chanting along with the crowd, thinking, I hope no one in this house thinks I'm losing it because I'm yelling so much. Of course, the animation plays a huge role in the portrayal of how exciting and how hard each player on both sides play in order to make the next point. Every character is challenged to continue reinventing themselves based on past practices and new experiences. There's Nishinoya, who readjusts his receives alongside the blockers to account for Ushijima's left-handed plays, the team figuring out how best to approach Tendo's chaotic and unpredictable guessing games, Kageyama and Hinata trying to push past their own limits like everyone else, but ultimately, I think the biggest contributor and the one who made so many things possible, including the win over Shida Torizawa, is Tsukishima. Tsuki, who initially didn't think highly of volleyball and didn't want to get too invested in the sport, ended up having one of the most epic moments in the series thus far that I seriously felt down to my bones. While not the flashiest or loudest of players, I could watch that one block over and over again and still get goosebumps. Just me thinking about it now gives me the chills. The moment leading up to it was so good and well thought out. And then Oikawa makes a cameo and wearing glasses no less. That perfectly topped off a really great 10 episodes. So while I enjoy all of Haikyuu and the journey to and during nationals, this third season stands out the most to me from character highlights, epic music, overall strategy, to just pure fun in witnessing Karasuno's win. Last series in this video will be my number 2 anime, and that's Horimiya. Spoiler alert that I'm going to talk about the Horimiya manga in my top 10 manga, so I'm going to focus on the points that I love about the series from the anime perspective only. So we have our 2 main characters, Hori-san and Miyamura, both who show different sides of themselves depending if they're at home or at school. They end up discovering these different sides of the other person by accident, which starts their initial bond and eventual relationship. When Hori is not at school, she's much more relaxed with her appearance and, despite being popular, prioritizes housework and taking care of her younger brother, Sota, over hanging out after school. It's kind of funny how very little difference I see between Hori at school and Hori at home appearance-wise, and same with how no one seems to know that Miyamura is who he is without his glasses. But that's besides the point because that's animation style. Then on the flip side, Miyamura is much more laid back and liberal with his piercings and tattoos in contrast to his recluse attitude and seemingly reserved appearance. But these two very different personalities coming together and complementing each other is what resulted in cementing themselves as an OTP for me. I love Hori-san and Miyamura as a couple so much. I thought all the moments in the anime where there's a pause during a critical moment of realization was a nice artistic touch and really highlights a change in feeling or perspective. While I wish there was more than just the 13 episodes we were given, I think they beautifully animated some of the right points from the manga, which you can essentially see the anime as a pretty good abbreviation of what to expect out of the manga. And although some may find this anime pretty average, I personally still enjoyed the episodes with the side characters. Actually, one of my favorite scenes involves Yuki, Yanagi, and Toru because it's so funny. And same with the scene between Hori-san, Miyamura, and Honoka. I laughed so much during those two moments. Do I wish there was a strict focus on the main couple? Sure, but I think the side characters provide so much comedy and little snippets of support for Hori-san and Miyamura. And while it may seem like the side character stories detract for the main couple, I think it's still nice that bits of the side characters' personalities are in there. So to me, this is practically a complete anime, and it's just why I love it so much. So this is the end of this video. The reason why I split off my top favorite anime is because I wanted to really highlight it and give it the solo spotlight video that I feel it deserves. I uploaded that video right after this, so if you feel like diving deep into that series with me, feel free to click onto the next video. See you soon.